Welcome back to the I Am Passionate podcast. It's your host, Jaren Smith. I hope you all are doing well. So, I kind of just want to explain why I took the breaks that I did, aka, I didn't have an episode, focusing on the NFC and AFC championships during the NFL season, which it's only been over for just a week. And it's Sunday, 3/28, the time of this recording. Ironically, I did record this episode already, but I have to re record it because, long story short, I have two laptops. I have a laptop that got me through college, laptop number one. Laptop number two, I bought the same exact computer. The only reason I got the same exact computer is because I really, really like this computer and I think it does some good things. It's just, I think my original one, with a few problems that it has and also the battery life, I'm like, might be a little easier to buy this laptop. And also, I got a great deal on the laptop. So that worked out for me. That's not even the focus of this episode. And so at the beginning of this episode, I just want to explain, my future plans for this podcast, and just kind of talk about that. So number one, with the NFL season being over, it opens the floor for more topics. And I understand that anime, video games, and football have been the main things for topics. So we can arguably call from this episode on to season two if you want to. I don't care. Maybe I'll call it season two, but we can have episodes that focus on more topics. Kevin had given me this idea a long time ago, having other people on who are very passionate about the things in their life and giving them a space to, just, hey, let their passions out. I think that'd be a really, really good idea. So I'm not 100% sure that this will be a weekly podcast. I think this will be something that when I have the ability to make a podcast episode, I will do it. I'm still going to try to get it out frequently because even though I am not a full-time content creator, I think one of the biggest things that I've seen content creators talk about online is just posting, because you might not get a lot of interaction. You might have one video to do really, really well, and then the next one maybe not so well. And so I think posting, will just be the best thing for me. So I think I can put a little bit more time into scripting certain episodes, not just football ones. And so this episode in particular is going to be a little on the shorter side. And so my last plan that I want to discuss is a social media plan. I want to be able to market this podcast. And I want this to be able to reach audiences bigger than just my family, my friends. And so for those of you who are listening, whether you're somebody who I've talked to last night, somebody I've not talked to in a while, if you know somebody who would be interested in hearing me and some of my friends yap just about topics that I've talked about in the past or will in the future, send this podcast to them. It would mean a lot to me just to be able to grow this podcast, even if through the effort of A, me improving myself, and B, other people helping me out a little bit. Even if just a few other people find my podcast, hey, I'll be happy. Okay, so enough about that. Let's talk about the Super Bowl. It's been a week, yes, and I wanted to fully digest the Super Bowl, kind of get some of my thoughts on paper, but to be honest, I don't really think there's as much to talk about. I don't really think that this is worthy of a 30-minute kind of conversation. And ironically, I had just thought of another idea to talk about, which we will talk about in a moment. The final score is 40-22. That does not show how much of a one-sided BTA that this game was. I really did not expect the Eagles to just run away with this game. I really didn't. I thought it was going to be, at most, maybe like a 10-point difference, no matter who had won the game. But at one point, the score was 34-0. If the Eagles had their starters in the entire time, they could have probably put up over 50. And yeah, no, I think that the Eagles, kind of just talking about them, I think Jalen Hurts played a pretty good game. He had spread the ball around. Kansas City was fully committed to stopping Saquon Barkley. I don't have his stats pulled up in front of me, but this was definitely his worst game of the playoffs. But hey, if you have your worst game in the Super Bowl and you're still able to, win at the end of the day, I'm sure he does not care about his stats, because at this point he's got the trophy. Yeah, he's been, in like little commercials or social media skits are Raising Cane's. He's been on Saturday Night Live. He's getting all that recognition. So I think at the with all that in the season he just had, I'm pretty sure he broke Terrell Davis's record for the most rushing yards in a single season by a running back. This has been one of the greatest, if not the greatest season ever by a running back. And I think that arguably Saquon Barkley is the best free agent signing ever. Now, I'd have to kind of get a list of some of those, but I definitely think he will be one of the best free agent signings ever, considering the success he's had in such a short amount of time. And plus, there were people writing off Saquon Barkley saying that he was not good, but people just had forgotten that he was trapped behind a bad Giants offensive line. So, hey, I think that next season he's going to keep doing it. I think him and Derrick Henry, I think they'll kind of compete for rushing titles from here on out, even though that Derrick Henry is a few years older than Saquon Barkley, but regardless. Jalen Hurts, he only really had one bad play, and it was the interception that he threw. The blitz that Kansas City had sent, there was definitely a miscommunication with the offensive line on the play, which I think it was Nick Bolton who had the free lane to Jalen Hurts, and which he threw the interception. Which I'm not trying to defend the interception because it was a bad play. But I think that if the offensive line had communicated that, and by that I mean, picked up each one of the guys that they were responsible for, whoever he was trying to throw it to, I don't know who he was trying to throw it to, they did not seem open. If he was going to take a shot, I think he was just going to launch out the end zone. But hey, that could just me being naive, but it just kind of seemed like the type of play where if nothing was there, he was just going to chuck it out the end zone in the direction of the receiver there. We already kind of talked about Saquon Barkley. He did have some good runs when they needed it the most, in which I don't really think the Eagles really had to deal with, the chains all that often. By that I mean they didn't have too many second and longs, third and longs. They pretty much stayed ahead of the chains all night. The Eagles' defensive line, I say, won them this game. They did not send a single blitz, and Patrick Mahomes was sacked multiple times. That is insane. And I think one of the best predictions I had on all the football episodes in the past is that in the last episode, the episode that came out before the Super Bowl, which if you have not seen it, go back and listen to it because I had Kevin and my brother on. We were moving around a little bit, but still talking about football. I did say to Kevin that I do believe the Eagles can get pressure without sending blitz a lot. And what did they do? They got pressure without sending any blitz. That might be one of my best predictions I've made all season. And if I had to give a hot take, I kind of thought Josh Sweat should have been the Super Bowl MVP. Now, I don't know what all the voting was like. I remember seeing something on Instagram that Cooper DeJean had a lot of the fan votes, which do play a factor in the Super Bowl MVP trophy. I don't know what Josh Sweat's was like, but I do know that he had 6 tackles, 2.5 sacks, and the pressure he forced did help the 2 interceptions. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but he had forced the pressure on the Cooper DeJean interception, which led to 7, and on the play where Zach Bond got that interception. And also, Zach Bond is going to get paid. He will be getting paid. Like, I think he was on the Saints last year, and he was a special teams player. Goes to the Eagles and is their best linebacker. He's going to get paid. So, I'm talking about the Chiefs. They couldn't do anything all night. I mean, we just talked about it. The Eagles defensive line, they just were giving Patrick Mahomes fits. And the Eagles made Patrick Mahomes just look so flustered. Like, I have not seen him struggle as much as he did since, the other Super Bowl he lost against the Buccaneers. And, I see the memes of, Tom Brady was by the memes of Tom Brady. It's like people are saying that like Tom Brady's probably happy that, Patrick Holmes lost the way that he did. And, there was like the memes with Nick Foles. I think Nick Foles tweeted that it's like, I'm happy Tom Brady's a supporter because the 2 Super Bowls that he went to of the Eagles won them both. So I think that was actually kind of funny. And yeah, the Chiefs receivers could not get open all night, and when they did, the game was over. The Eagles backups were, coming in the game, and so yeah, the Chiefs abandoned the run game kind of early. I mean, I feel like kind of outside of the Eagles' first 10 to 14 points, they kind of just did not really run the ball. In which over time, I mean, like I get it because, I mean, they were down by multiple scores. They got to get down the field quickly. But yeah, I kind of wish they had at least tried to a little bit more earlier in the game, just considering that, didn't have the time. And plus, I feel like the Chiefs did not adapt to the pass rush as well as they could have. By that I mean if you're not able to get consistent protection, I don't really think you should have your receivers running deep. I understand Xavier Worthy is a deep threat. I understand Marquise Brown is a deep threat, but I think you need to have routes that you have enough time to make a decision. And I get it. There were plays where Patrick Mahomes did have time and he just did not make the best of decisions. But I think that it's the definition of insanity if you're gonna send a lot of deeper running route and then Patrick Mahomes can't get it off, like to throw the ball to him. It's insanity to think that if you keep doing that, one of these times it's going to work out, even if it is the Kansas City Chiefs. And also, speaking of the Kansas City Chiefs, Kevin had posed this question to me when we were playing PlayStation, and the question was, do the Chiefs need to get their hands on a true number one wide receiver? Because a lot of the receivers were kind of gadget guys, speedy guys, project guys, which, I mean, nothing wrong with having a fast wide receiver, but I think that they would really benefit from having an aggressive jump ball type of wide receiver. D Hop is past his prime, even though in the last episode I was talking about him being a dog. Kelsey is thinking of retirement. I personally don't think he's going to retire. That'll probably be my number one offseason prediction, that he tries to run it back, simply just because he does not seem like the type of person who will be okay ending his career on a Super Bowl loss, especially in a game he didn't play well. It would have been different if, say, he had a couple of touchdowns, had like 150 yards, and it's just he balled out in a loss. I think if he balled out in a loss, I think he would have retired and been okay with it. But he only caught like 3 or 4 passes. I don't know the yards he had. He did not play well. And, you can kind of, there were those things on the sideline. The other meme, which it was my favorite meme, it was that they thought they were going to be an edit on social media, which that is just so funny. That was so funny. And so with the receivers, though, Worthy can develop into becoming a great receiver. Only time will tell if he's a true number one wide receiver. And the other question is, will the Chiefs resign, Marquise Brown, which, they had the intentions of pairing him up with Rashee Rice, which again, Rashee Rice can be a number one wide receiver because I feel like, last year he played really, really well, but we don't know how he's gonna play with, coming back from I believe he tore his ACL with early in the season against the Chargers. We don't know how he'll come back. I think he'll come back fine, but yeah, we just kind of have to see. But I do think Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and Marquise Brown is a pretty decent wide receiver core. But yeah, my question being that I think they need to get another guy, specifically a guy, a bigger body type of player, just because, we saw what's happened to with the once Rashee Rice went down. I feel like that just took a huge hit on their offense. So I think they need to get another type of guy who can, no matter if you're the number one option or you're like a number three option, you just kind of need that guy who can step in and make big plays. Maybe if they have a game where Rashee Rice doesn't play, maybe he has a minor injury. I think you need that type of player. And so, really, that is the main questions that I've had for this episode. My last question is just really a Super Bowl aftermath question, and it is, who are the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL as of today? Or I can phrase it, who are the 5 quarterbacks who you would want on your team if you were starting one? Either or, it is kind of the same question in my opinion. It's not entirely the same, but it's similar. So the number one quarterback, I think, is the only one that is non-negotiable for me. It's still Mahomes, despite having a bad Super Bowl game. I think the Chiefs will rebuild that offensive line a little bit more and, have some more depth pieces. But, quarterbacks 2 through 5 are pretty negotiable. I think that they all deserve to be in the top 5. Their placement within the top 5 is negotiable. And there's only one person on this list that my bias kicks in, but I think most of you out there will probably still agree with him at least being in the top 5. But my list, Mahomes at number 1, Lamar Jackson at number 2, Josh Allen at number 3, Joe Burrow at number 4, and Jalen Hurts at number 5. Joe Burrow is the only person on the list where if you were to say Jaren, he's not top 5. And then I hear your reasons why, and I'd be like, okay, who would you switch him with? There's a couple of guys that you could say, which I'm not going to say them all for the sake of conversation because I did not write them down and I don't want to have a huge silence within this episode. But there's a couple of guys where if you were to say their name, I'd agree with you. And I also add this just because they're going to be some of the popular names. People are going to say Jaden Daniels or Bo Nix, which don't get me wrong, I think they're great. I am not putting them in my top 10 just yet. I think they're great. I think they're better than a lot of the quarterbacks starting on the league. But my thing is, a lot of quarterbacks have that great first season, then kind of have a sophomore slump. So, in a couple of years, if Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, and Kevin's probably saying, Jaren, why haven't you heard Caleb Williams yet? But those three, it'll be a couple of years for me to be like, all right, yeah, they're definitely top 10 worthy quarterbacks in my list. But right now, they're not in my top 10. I definitely would say, at worst, if I was willing to place them somewhere, I think all of them are within the top half of quarterbacks. They're all top 16 quarterbacks, in my opinion. But I think Joe Burrow is the only one that you can take out of my top 5, and I'd be okay with. And the reason why Jalen Hurts jumps the list to me is he's consistently taking his team to the playoffs. And I think he's not a quarterback that has to put up, crazy, flashy numbers. I think he can get away with a 20-yard game. Maybe he throws for a touchdown and runs for one. And, some people may not like that. And, hey, that's okay because all I'm saying is if Lamar Jackson in the playoffs, let's just say his best game, he only throws for 20 yards, but he gets a Super Bowl trophy, the Ravens Super Bowl trophy, hey, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because the days of quarterbacks consistently throwing for 300 yards all the time, I think that's slowly coming to a decline because if there's anything that we learned from this season, it's that the run. I'm hoping that, Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, I'm hoping they kind of revive the running back market a little bit because, look, Saquon Barkley just won the Super Bowl. He arguably was the biggest reason that they were there. Um, Derrick Henry had an amazing season, and the thing is, I think he had 30 less carries than Saquon Barkley, and he didn't even have 100 less yards than him. And that makes me think that if, they had the same amount of carries, Derrick Henry would have been the rushing leader. And I'm not saying that with bias. I'm just saying that based off of the numbers possible. So let me know what kind of people that you would place in your top 5. I'm sure that other people, they're going to discredit Lamar in his playoff, shortcomings, which I think that you also still have to have Josh Allen in the playoff shortcomings list because at this point between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, the two things that they have in common is they don't beat Kansas City when it matters most. Now, this season, Lamar Jackson lost to Josh Allen. That is okay. But do I think that the Ravens would have beaten Kansas City in a rematch from last year? I'm a little torn personally. I think and the last thing that I will end this episode on truly is kind of going back to my earlier thought. I think the Chiefs will be back because I don't think a single AFC team except for the Ravens, the Bills, and the Bengals, I think those are the top 3 teams to stop the Chiefs from going back to the Super Bowl. The Bengals need to build that defense back up. Like, if they even just had, let's just say, an average defense, that's already helping them out tremendously. I think they would have made the playoffs if they had at least an average defense this past season. And, they have got a huge amount of questions. I saw some stuff saying that Trey Hendrickson might be on the move, which I'm like, bro, you're getting rid of your best defensive player. I don't know. T. Higgins, that situation. And so, the Eagles are able to pay everybody. And I saw some comments Joe Burrow was saying, and like, yeah, he made some valid points, basically talking about how you can construct contracts to be able to pay, a lot of different people. And so, if the Bengals can somehow retain all their star power, I think they'll be back. I think they really will. But the Ravens, I think they would just need to stick to what gets them so far because Lamar Jackson is the best dual threat quarterback in NFL history. The Ravens are the best running team under Lamar Jackson in NFL history. They've always had a solid defense. The defense stepped up in the second half of the season, but in the playoffs, they just abandoned what gets them so far in the season. And the Bills, I mean, they did not have the star power on their offense this year. I think there'll probably be a couple of people who decide to go play in Buffalo on the offensive side of the ball specifically. And it's just they're so close, just like the Ravens are. They're so close. They just need one game to go their way against, like the Kansas Cities in the world in the postseason. They just need one game to go their way. And if they get that, I think that they can, finally end their curse of, not being able to make it out of the AFC and potentially win the Super Bowl. But that is really all I had to discuss. Besides for the last comment, the halftime show. The halftime show. I love the halftime show. I think Kendrick Lamar had some, great music in that. And ironically, I had mentioned earlier in the podcast that we talk about it later. And then in my mind, I forgot. And I'm bringing it up now just because it'd be a good thing to talk about. I think it was a great halftime show. It's got to be one of my favorites. The message behind the Super Bowl performance is very, very powerful. It made me think of some things and, kind of how I live my day-to-day life. And I think it's gone over a lot of people's heads. The meaning, the message of the Super Bowl, and just how he started was awesome. There was a couple of older songs I wanted him to perform, but I get why he didn't, because Kevin had a great point. Because his last album had a lot of hits on it. He's going to play more of his recent stuff. The only reason I had thought he was gonna play, his song "We Gon' Be All Right," I thought he was gonna play that just because there might not be as many people who know Kendrick's like songs from around that time, but I feel like that's a song that a lot of people would know. Maybe they don't know the name of the song, but they know like the general hook. But no, I'm very, very happy with the Super Bowl performance. Samuel, I think the message behind it was my favorite part. Like even just more so from the music, and Kendrick's songs have been stuck in my head. Like, I've been playing video games with Kevin and my brother. Like we've been playing a lot of Call of Duty, and after every kill, we've been saying peekaboo. But that's really all I had to say about it. It's one of my favorite Super Bowl performances. Let me know in the comments what your favorite Super Bowl performance is. But I just want to thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the I Am Passionate podcast, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.